Welcome to Hoystory on Air, Season 1, Episode 19. Today's a long day. I did substitute teaching this morning, so didn't have a whole lot of time to work on this during the day. So this is going to go up pretty late tonight. For that, I apologize. Others, if you're on the West Coast, you're fine. If you're on the East Coast, this might come a little late. Maybe you'll see it tomorrow morning. A lot of news today. So let's get to it. Big news, suspect finally arrested into those pipe bombs that were planted January 5th, 2021. Suspect's a 30-year-old guy from Virginia. This is the New York Times article. I picked this one up to kind of go through for part of this because it's kind of typically of what you see with some liberal media bias. You try and keep this stuff out. I mean, if you're doing real journalism, you try and keep this out of your regular reporting into the opinion pages. But Trump changed a lot of things, and this is one of them, unfortunately. So, a 30-year-old man from Virginia. This is the lead. This is the first paragraph. Federal agents arrested a Virginia man on Thursday on charges that he planted 2 pipe bombs on Capitol Hill the night before January 6, 2021. A breakthrough that came after years of false leads and rampant conspiracy theories, some promoted by the same FBI leaders who took credit for cracking the case. Well, yeah, there were conspiracy theories, and frankly, a lot of them have come true, like, COVID being out of a lab. If you still think that came out of a wet market, you need to have your head examined. The joke is all my conspiracy theories come true. This wasn't an inside job by the FBI. That's what some, including I think Bongino, who was doing the press conference today, had suggested. But I will say this: it's kind of curious that it took 4 plus years, for this to be solved, and it gets solved real quick once Trump's people are in there. I don't know why that is, but if you've got a little bit of a conspiracy minded part of your body, then I don't blame you. Okay. While arresting a suspect in the case was a significant achievement for the FBI and the Justice Department under Mr. Trump, Ms. Bondi used the moment to criticize Mr. Biden, falsely claiming that the case had been left to languish under his administration. That's commentary. That sentence, the falsely claiming, you just say claiming. What evidence do you have that it's falsely claimed? Well, we go to the next paragraph, and it's not much evidence at all, frankly. Said, in fact, the FBI had gone to great lengths to identify the would-be bomber almost from the moment the explosive devices were discovered. Circulating video clips of a figure walking on Capitol Hill, it said had left the devices. That's going to great lengths? Well, let's continue. Investigators conducted hundreds of interviews and produced intensive profiles on 5 to 10 suspects in the first 2 years of the inquiry. Okay, let's go back there. No, sorry, we're in the right place. It had been left to languish. So they did all this investigation in the first 2 years of the inquiry. What happened in years 3 and 4? Did the investigation languish? I think a case could be made that maybe it did. If all you've got is we did all this work in years 1 and 2, and years 3 and 4, it sat there, and we didn't prosecute anybody, we didn't arrest anybody after year 2. We sat on it another 2 years, and then Trump comes in, and I don't know when Bongino and Patel were confirmed by the Senate, but say it was March to November, 8 months later, they managed to arrest somebody. Do I know if this guy's guilty? I don't know. But it's more than Biden did. Uh, Again, I want to point this out. So let's go to the next video, next slide. This is a video. Take a quick listen. I've trimmed this down because I, the back slapping and the patting yourself on the back and all that other sort of stuff just doesn't interest me. But everybody does this. So the idea that it's just Trump, kissing up to Trump and whatnot. The Christopher Wray and the other people would have done the same thing if this had happened a year ago and it had been Biden who'd done it. Biden who was president when it happened. So take a listen.
Matter, and this was a team effort. The director and the attorney general emphasized that it was not a new public tip this came from. This was our internal work at the FBI.
I don't know why the video doesn't flow. I'll have to work on that. But you heard the audio. The information was all there. This wasn't a new tip. It wasn't new information that occurred. This was stuff that they found in the first year or two, because we got no word on anything on year 3 or 4 when it languished. Bad media. But this next one is interesting. And I saw lawyers on Twitter and /X comment on this too. Mr. Trump, in one of his first official acts after returning to the White House this year, issued a grant of clemency to the nearly 1,600 rioters on the January 6th attack. His proclamation was extraordinarily broad, covering all defendants accused or convicted of, quote, offenses related to events that occurred at or near the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. It is possible that defense lawyers will try to argue that placing of the pipe bomb should also be covered by Mr. Trump's proclamation. Again, this is the problem with blanket pardons, whether Trump does it, whether Biden does it, where you're not naming people, you're just saying people like this. Heck, this might go back to Carter and his decision to pardon Vietnam war protesters or whatnot who fled to Canada. People who'd been drafted and said, no, I'm not going to fight, I'm going to Canada. Those sorts of extraordinarily broad state, pardons, which could encompass some other people. I suspect that the government's defense is going to be that these acts occurred on January 5th, the actual placing of the bombs, not January 6th. So I think that's, and we'll see. We'll see what a judge in D.C. has to say about that. I'm not going to predict one way or another on that, simply because I can see both ways. I'm skeptical that conservatives can get justice in D.C. It seems like they come down on them like a ton of bricks, and liberals get, the sandwich. I think the guy who threw a sandwich at an ICE agent a few months ago, and he was acquitted. I probably would have acquitted him too. It's stupid, but don't start anything. Nothing will happen to you. But there seems to be that sort of, the juries you get in D.C. are a little bit more forgiving of a certain one side of the aisle versus the other. But that would just be classic. So the next thing I want to point out is, this is something that, and this is from the New York Times article as well. This is something I mentioned on one of my first podcasts or broadcasts or whatever you want to call this. A couple weeks ago, The Blaze, far-right news outlet. Yeah, it's far-right. I glanced at it today for the first time since they published the article we're talking about here. And yeah, it's far-right. Published an article claiming that the bomber was a former law enforcement official identified by a computer analysis of the way the person walked. Mr. Bongino pushed back hard against Blaze's report, saying, this is at the time, saying the Bureau's investigation was continuing. A couple things. If the Blaze and the FBI and whatnot were the higher ups of the FBI were giving tips and favoritism to right-wing news outlets now that Trump was in office and these guys are in office, you'd think they would have waved the Blaze off. Said, no, don't do it. Don't do it. But they didn't. Or if they did, I said at the time, the Blaze was asking for it. Gait analysis. Oh, we're going to do this based on the way this person walks. Man, I mean, it was an interesting little, technological thing in one of the recent Mission Impossible movies. But you're going to name someone and accuse them of serious crimes based on the way they walk, and that's basically it. That's basically all that was in the Blaze article. Not smart. I just no. I went over to the Blaze today. Like I said, started scrolling through, and they churn out a lot of copy for what's probably a reasonably small number of writers. There's maybe 4 or 5 writers, it seemed. They churn out content. I looked through everything published today. There is not a new article on there about this arrest. There's nothing. But if you go back to the article they published, 2 weeks ago, January 6th, no, November 8th, right here we go, November 8th. So this was three and a half weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. Former Capitol Police officer. You go back to the article today, now we have an update at the top. Update December 4th. News stories published Thursday morning report that the FBI arrested a male suspect in the pipe bomb case. At this point, there is no indication from the FBI that Shawnee Kirchhoff, this is who's going to have a nice payday thanks to the Blaze, is a suspect in the FBI's investigation. This is a developing story and will be updated. You done screwed up. Yeah, that's prepare to cut a check. I'd start backpedaling now because the check will be smaller, but it's still going to be a sizable check. Dumb. I wanted to close this part of the presentation with a tweet from Eric Erickson, syndicated radio talk show guy out of Atlanta. He makes a good point. I would like to also see this happen. With no new leads or information, could you track down a man who planted pipe bombs 5 years ago? Try and figure out who left the cocaine in the Biden White House, since the Secret Service couldn't figure it out. I'd be interested to know, and please do. We'll see if this all holds up. It's going to be interesting, but this was, this is one of the big unsolved cases from around that time. Again, I'm not a big fan usually of conspiracy theories, but there are things that people call conspiracy theories that aren't, and there's plenty of evidence for them. Again, the COVID lab leak hypothesis is probably the best one that I can think of. Going to move on. Second story, again, I'm limited here on time just because it was a long day, and I did want to get this news out. Our next story is Planned Parenthood. Judge blocks provision of law that strips Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood affiliates. Judge's order lifting the funding ban applies to 22 states and D.C. Planned Parenthood hailed the judge's decision. Again, this is based on that one big beautiful bill that basically said, Planned Parenthood, if you do abortion stuff, we're not going to, money is fungible. We are not going to fund you doing, Medicaid stuff because it's just keeping you alive. No, no pun intended. It's keeping your business alive, and we don't like your business. That is a decision as far as, who we fund and how we fund and who qualifies for funding, that seems to be full. If you just look at it from a constitutional standpoint, it's fully within the power of the purse granted the House. And in a broader sense, the legislative branch. But it's got to start in the House. So they passed this, said, you guys can't have money. And of course, this judge said, oh, no, you can. Federal judges again blocked a provision Congress passed in July that stripped federal Medicaid funding from Planned Parenthood affiliates, ruling that the language likely places an unconstitutional burden on states to apply vague criteria about the scope of the ban. I don't think it's vague criteria. I think it's probably pretty obvious, which is why Planned Parenthood is suing and your Joe Schmo other providers aren't, because it's apparent who it applies to. It applies to these guys who want their money. Let me rephrase that. They want our money. U.S. District Judge Indira Talwani issued a preliminary injunction prohibiting the Trump administration from requiring states to figure out which of their health care providers are covered by the ban and stop funding the non-abortion services the clinics provide to Medicaid patients. First off, Talwani's Obama appointee. Again, in theory, that shouldn't matter who appointed them. They should be, following the law. In reality, it very much matters, 95% of the time. And is it really an undue burden for the federal government to set rules and then say, hey, you've got to vet these people. You got to make sure you're giving the money to people who are allowed to get it and not to people who aren't allowed to get it. Seems like a pretty dang basic function of the government, but not for Talwani and this I love. So this is the second lawsuit. There was another one that was filed by its Planned Parenthood's national organization and its state affiliates from Utah and Massachusetts and an independent network of clinics in Maine. Talwani also handled that lawsuit, shocker, and granted a preliminary injunction there. First Circuit Court of Appeals put the ruling on hold in September, so that's still not happening. But Talwani included the lawsuit, concluding that it amounted to an unconstitutional bill of attainder against Planned Parenthood. A bill of attainder. I know those are banned, but what's a bill of attainder? A law that sentences a person or group of people to suffer punishment for a crime without being able to exercise their judicial rights in defending themselves. Crime? What crime are we talking about? Is not getting federal money punishment for a crime? You have a right. If Congress passed a law tomorrow saying that Hoystory on Air is to receive, let's just say what the Jews allegedly owe me, $14,000 an episode to broadcast. And then the Democrats won in 2026 and stripped that funding. So let's say it was set to go in perpetuity or for 10 years or for 20 years or whatever. And the Democrats take over and strip that or pass new legislation saying Hoystory on Air does not get that $14,000 an episode. Is that all of a sudden a bill of attainder? Do I have a right to taxpayer dollars? I don't think I do. Republicans in Congress, give it a shot for me. Appreciate it. I'd like the cash. It's an absolute joke. The other thing with this, and it shouldn't surprise us, considering that what the judge has done previously. But when you have a situation like this where money's going to go out, or you're saying money needs to keep on going out, you have to sit there and say, well, if we lose, how do we get the money back? And the answer usually is you can't get the money back. So what they'll do is they'll say, hey, they've got to put what's the term? Bond. They have to put a bond in, and they did this with Trump with his, before he could allegedly appeal that verdict in New York about that's it's going to get overturned. It's bad law. It's an absolute joke. The state government, there are all sorts of problems with it. But the state of New York was saying, oh no, you've got to put up so many $100 million bond just in case you lose. And that was, if it stands, he's going to have to do that money anyways. But the requirement of a bond before you can appeal is a joke. But it's similar sort of things happening here. But it's more important because money is going to be going out. If this ruling stands, money is going to go out. They're going to appeal, and say the appeal gets heard 3 months, 6 months later. There are millions of dollars that are going to go to Planned Parenthood that this judge allowed that is not legal. That's what higher courts are going to say. And so if that's the case, okay, yes, you can get the money now, but you put up this bond just in case we need to claw it back. And they put the bond amount at $7.2 million annually, or $600,000 a month, which reflects a conservative estimate of $800,000 in annual federal expenditures for each entity the plaintiff states identify as likely to meet the definition of a prohibited entity. And the judge says, the last sentence, the court thus finds that where injunctive relief will not cause monetary harm to defense, only a nominal bond of hundreds need to be posted. So they put up $100 in case you need to claw it back. And the logic around that is the Medicaid program's still going to have to spend this money. It's just, the people will get money, the people will get the treatment, but it will not go through Planned Parenthood. So because of that, the money is going to be spent anyways. Again, money is fungible, right? So if you're going to spend it anyways, you might as well spend it at Planned Parenthood. That's the logic. She's not staying her ruling until it's appealed. She's on her own. She's going to say, no, that's on the right. She's going to stay it for 7 days so that they can appeal, and it's going to put the onus on the appeals court to put a halt to this. There was another story I was going to get to today. I didn't. There was a hearing before the United States Supreme Court, and I'll get into this in more depth in a day or two maybe. Because the state of New Jersey wanted the donors of some pregnancy resource centers in order to kind of threaten them and cut their funding and all this other sort of stuff. And that was heard before the Supreme Court. It's very similar to a case that occurred a few years ago, same sort of thing, but in California. This one's in New Jersey. In California with pregnancy resource centers, and the Supreme Court smacked that one down. I suspect they'll smack this one down, but I bring that up to make the point that a lot of pro-choice people aren't pro-choice, they're pro-abortion. They do not want women making the choice to have the baby. And this is part and parcel of that. That's all I got for today. For people who've watched everything, this whole episode, thank you. I appreciate it. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. I really need to grow this, and word of mouth is probably going to be key helping that. If you've made it to the end and this was a slog, and you were only interested in the second part, you wish you could have just jumped to that. For the record, people who are seeing this on my Substack, I'm also posting this over on YouTube. I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe money-wise on Substack. That would help me. But if you watch it on YouTube and subscribe over there, you can as well. But usually over on YouTube, what I will do is if I have, bigger blocks, I will cut them down so just that block appears. And you can watch just this part about the Planned Parenthood ruling, or just the part about the arrest in the pipe bomber case. So especially if you're limited on time, if you just want to watch one, not the other, those appear over on YouTube. So if I'm only good in small doses sometimes, I realize that, appreciate that. You can see those shorter videos over on YouTube. youtube.com/@Hoystory. The links are down below. Thank you for joining me. Hope to have another show tomorrow. We'll see. Again, thanks for stopping by.